Good evening, and welcome to the Town of Islip Planning Board meeting for Wednesday, October 14, 2020. Due to COVID restrictions, we are still operating via the Zoom application. If you're just joining us and you would like to speak on an application that's designated as a public hearing and you did not sign up to speak on that application, I would ask that you hit the raise your hand button and we'll get to you and sign you up for the specific hearing you wanted to speak on that's designated as a public hearing. To our applicants, we ask that you observe the 30-minute rule on the application. We'll let you know when you're approaching the 30-minute, and those who are speaking from the community, we ask you to observe the 3-minute rule, and we'll let you know when you're approaching the 3 minutes as well. So we're going to go to our first item on the agenda, which is a major subdivision bond release, Ruby Court, Bohemia, MS 2013-003, west side of Ocean Avenue, number 1250, 529 feet south of Hubble Street, Bohemia. The applicant requests the release of surety bonds and a cash bond in connection with the previously approved 2-lot major subdivision. I know the applicant's not here, so I'm going to turn to Mr. Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. This is a 2-lot major subdivision that was given ultimate final approval on March 15, 2018. The map was eventually filed on August 17th of that same year at the county clerk's office. This application was last before this board on January 10th, 2019 to accept continuation certificates for drainage and road work associated with the development. At this time, all conditions and requirements of this development have been completed and satisfactorily signed off by all relevant departments. Based on this, staff and the town engineer has recommended the following: a full bond, surety bond release for bond number 63034116 in the amount of $4,316. Surety bond number 63034117 in the amount of $13,372, and the cash bond in the amount of $5,000.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. I know somebody had asked to speak on this, but this is not a public hearing and not open to public comment. Just wanted to state that. Are there any questions for Mr. Gonzalez? Not seeing any. Is there a motion? Mr. Brown.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to grant the applicant's request and release the surety bond number 63034116 in the amount of $4,316. The surety bond 63034117 in the amount of $13,372, and the cash bond in the amount of $5,000.
Thank you. There's a motion by Mr. Brown to grant the request and release the 3 bonds as he stated. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Frugieri. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? It's approved. Thank you. Item 2 on the agenda, major subdivision decision item, Campo Brothers, Treadwell Court, MS 2017-001, west side of Smithtown Avenue, number 751, number 761, and number 767, 693 feet north of Sunrise Highway Service Road, State Route 27, Bohemia, New York. Applicant requests a waiver of the required sidewalk for this previously approved 11-lot major subdivision. Good evening to the applicant. Mr. Strauss, once you're ready, just unmute and you can go ahead. Mr. Strauss, you with us?
Did that work, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, go right ahead.
Okay, great. I'm sorry about that. Michael Strauss, 907 Main Street, Port Jefferson, New York, representing the owner, Campo Brothers Associates. We're here for relief of sidewalks. And of course, we'll be willing to pay the fee in lieu of installing the sidewalks. There are two areas. One are the sidewalks along the existing roadway, and one are Smithtown Avenue, and one are potential sidewalks inside the subdivision. With respect to Smithtown Avenue, my understanding is the sidewalks don't start till 5 or 6 houses further to the north, and everything is developed in between so that there won't be anything coming before you to require sidewalks. So we would prefer to pay the fee, and then if the town ever decided that they were a good idea, they could all be installed at once rather than one freestanding piece. There's also a letter which we submitted to planning from Roy Treadwell, who's the owner of the existing house that's part of the subdivision fronting on Smith Avenue, who is vehemently opposed to having the sidewalks put in. With respect to the sidewalks inside the subdivision, that's not typically done. The end buyers of the homes that are currently being constructed do not want the sidewalks. They do not want what they would consider more of an urban look. And they very much would not like them. And of course, we will pay the fee in lieu so that the town ultimately can make whatever decision the town wants to make. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer them.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Mr. Gonzalez for a report, and then we'll come back for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This 11-lot major subdivision was originally granted final approval on September 6, 2018. The approved plan is before you on the screen share. The map was filed November 25th, 2019 at the county clerk's office. As Mr. Strauss stated, the applicant is before you tonight requesting the waiver of sidewalk that was required as part of the approved development and to pay mitigation fee in lieu of that installation. Per the approved plan, new sidewalk was to be installed along the entire property frontage of Smithtown Avenue with ADA ramps on the corners of the new road going into the development, which is also known as Treadwell Court, as well as the entire interior of that new road. The amount is roughly 1,748 linear feet of sidewalk. A more thorough analysis was done on Smithtown Avenue, and the following information was obtained based on 2016 and 2019 aerials, as well as Google Street View between 2019 and 2020. On the east side of Smithtown Avenue, which is the side this development is on, just north, about 6 homes to the north, the sidewalk network starts, as Mr. Strauss stated, and continues pretty much all the way north up to Lakeland Avenue. Of the approximately 7,900 linear feet of Smithtown Avenue, 1,425 of it, or about 18% of this side of the road, has no sidewalk. When you account for side streets, as you know, there's not going to be a sidewalk going through a open and improved road, that number drops to about 13.5%. If you account for the few undeveloped lots, which are further north near Lakeland Avenue, and the private entrance curb cuts on some of the properties going north, that number drops even further. So basically, based on those numbers, it's about 90% of the available frontage of this road provides sidewalk on this side. The west side, the other side of the street, has about 63% providing sidewalk. And then if you account for the similar things, you know, private curb cuts, side streets, etc., it's probably about 75% of the available frontage provides sidewalk. You know, in addition to this being the nature and character of the majority of Smithtown Avenue, taking a mitigation fee in lieu of sidewalk for this development does not equate to an equal amount of sidewalk elsewhere in the town. Just for everyone's own edification, the town has a current figure of $20 per linear foot, which is severely outdated, and based on a current estimate by the town engineer, it costs the town approximately triple that, $60 per linear foot, to install sidewalk. So we are only getting 1/3 of that fee. This is a new development featuring 11 homes, over 700 feet of new road, the Treadwell Court. on Smithtown Avenue that has a very long network of sidewalk. Sidewalk should remain along Smithtown Avenue at the very least. Whether the interior amount for the new road remains a requirement is up to this board. However, as stated before, that mitigation fee does not cover that same amount of sidewalk installation elsewhere in the town. That figure has been discussed, but has not changed as of yet.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. What is the mitigation fee that'll be paid for this right now?
It would amount to $20 per linear foot. So depending on if there's a full waiver or a partial waiver, you know, we would do that calculation afterwards and find the figure.
Is there any reason why we would not, I know that's not required, is there any reason why we'd not voluntarily ask the applicant to pay 2/3 more, which would cover the cost if in fact they wanted to install it?
It would take either a code change or an amendment to the land development regulations, from my understanding, and that just hasn't happened yet as part of you know, putting that forth.
Right. Yeah, I guess my question would be, I know that to require that to be the exact fee, that would be a code change. Are we permitted to accept a higher fee voluntarily is my question, I guess.
That I don't have an answer for you at the moment. You know, I'd have to confer with town attorney's office, to be honest.
Yeah, that would be my only question that I have based upon the comments that you made. If it's in fact the town wanted to go forward with a sidewalk later on, the fee that you're saying we're going to collect is 1/3 of the actual cost to do that.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Frugieri.
Yeah, Tanner, can you just clarify one thing? The relief he's looking for is the sidewalks along both Smithtown Avenue and Treadwell Court, correct?
Correct. Yep.
So if a full waiver was granted, there would be more than sufficient funds to complete sidewalks should the town decide that would be necessary due to the nature and character of Smithtown Avenue. There would be sufficient funds to do that, right?
I don't know if it would be enough to do the rest of Smithtown Avenue. There's about, I think it was 1,748 linear feet that was part of this proposed sidewalk. So if we're getting about $20 per linear foot for that, 1748.
What's the linear footage on just Smithtown Avenue?
Of area that doesn't have sidewalk?
Of area in front of the applicant's property that doesn't have sidewalk?
I believe it's close to 300 feet. It looks like the frontage is, if we could zoom in on that plan right there.
So that's about what, $18,000 to complete?
For the town, yeah.
For the town, so it would be 60 times
Yeah. Can I
300
get
feet.
a moment, Mr. Ferrajari?
Sure, by all means.
Mr. Bruno.
I'm going in the same direction you are, as a matter of fact. My thought, and I just throw it out there, and here's my question, Tanner. If we had the applicant do the piece on Smithtown Avenue, but did not do the piece on Treadwell, would there be enough money to then connect up from the piece on Smithtown? And would we have enough money to complete in front of the 6 houses going north? Okay, in other words, so that piece that he puts in front of Smithtown isn't standing by itself anymore. We take the Treadwell piece and we run it up the other way. It looks to me like Treadwell is there'd be at least twice as much there. So I'm trying to say, my thought, just looking at it, is they put in the sidewalk on Smithtown, pay the mitigation fee on Treadwell, and the money that we're paid from Treadwell connects up the 6 houses that don't have it in front of them on Smithtown. I think that's where Mr. Ferrajari, I think that we're kind of going in the same direction here. And I hope you don't mind, sir. That's why I kind of got in on it.
No, that's good.
May I speak, Mr. Chairman, or would you like me to wait?
No, please go right ahead.
So I think from what I'm gleaning from the board's attitude about this, which I honestly have to say does make some sense, even though my client would prefer it to all be waived. That if we put in the sidewalks on Smithtown Avenue, I think the whole fee would have been about $35,000. If we just do the piece on Smithtown Avenue, there would still be $29,000 approximately available to the town, which just my guess in hearing these numbers tonight would be more than sufficient to do the additional sidewalk work on Smithtown Avenue. And I think that sounds like a reasonable plan and compromise, I think, all around in terms of what makes the most sense and is somewhat reasonable to my client. It also doesn't kind of impose sidewalks on the interior for the end buyers who would be very unhappy about it.
Mr. Gonzalez?
So that would be satisfactory to the applicant, the board, if the board agrees.
Mr. Gonzalez, can you just confirm?
Yes, so essentially have them install their frontage worth of sidewalk and then use the mitigation fee if you condition so strictly for Smithtown Avenue connection. Is that basically the premise here?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I mean, as far as the particulars in assigning a particular location for where the mitigation fee money is used, I personally can't speak to the viability of that because I know it goes into a fund for the hamlet, to my knowledge. So to choose a specific location for the project, I'm not quite sure.
I don't know that we need to specify the specific location. It's just if in fact there was a cost, if it was done in the future, that the cost would cover it. Mr. Bruno?
Yeah.
Well, the point is also that the John Pearl School is on Smithtown Avenue. So it's very possible. In other words, the sidewalk fund is often used to put sidewalks by schools. That's the idea, being able to walk schools, different areas. Smithtown Avenue is kind of up further. Church Street is kind of Main Street Bohemia. I live there, as you know, so I'm kind of familiar with this, and I'm saying it would actually, if we can condition it, I would like very much to do that, Tanner, because the whole point of this, I agree with Mr. Strauss that putting in a piece of walk that doesn't go anywhere, doesn't do anything, and the whole point with giving it up on Treadwell is I think we're all agreed that we like the trade-off so that we can finish a network that here you're in agreement that engineering is agreeing should in fact be finished. To not be able to then say that's what we're going to do seems a little odd to me.
Yeah, if if we condition it to be able to use those monies to further connect the Smithtown Avenue connection, then it seems like the applicant is agreeable to that. As you know, I don't think as far as engineering or staff would have an issue with that.
And that's fine. And if we're not permitted to do so, you still have the mitigation fee and that part's ruled out. But I agree with Mr. Bruno on that as well.
Yeah, we'll vet that afterwards. And if it turns out that, that's not possible, then, we still have the mitigation money to use in the hamlet. So
That being said, any further questions for the applicant? Anything further from the applicant?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Is there a motion? Mr. Bruno?
Make a motion that the applicant be required to put the sidewalk on Smithtown Avenue, but pay the mitigation fee for sidewalk along Treadwell Court, and that the board is requesting that the monies be used to connect up the piece from Smithtown Avenue that's being put in by the applicant northward to connect up the rest of the roadway, the sidewalk system.
Thank you. So it's a motion by Mr. Bruno to, I should say, as he just stated, but I'll repeat it as best I can, for the applicant to complete the sidewalk on Smithtown Avenue that they're required to in front of the property, and then to pay a mitigation fee for the sidewalk that would have been required on Treadwell Court. And if possible, that a condition be placed in there that earmarks the money from Treadwell Court to be used on Smithtown Avenue to connect the sidewalk in front of the development with the sidewalk further north. Gary, with a nod of your head, is that correct?
That's correct.
That's the motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Frugieri. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? It's granted, as stated. Thank you. I just want
Thank
to
you
state for the
very
record.
much.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you
Russell.
very much.
Thank you. Just want to state for the record that we do have all board members on the Zoom meeting tonight. Third item on the agenda, Town Board Application Recommendation Item, J. Nazaro Partnership LP, CZ 2020-003, southeast corner of Montauk Highway, County Route 85 and Atlantic Avenue, West Sayville, 90 Montauk Highway. Applicant requests a change of zone from Business 1 District to Business 3 District, a Town Board special permit for a fast food restaurant pursuant to 68-302G, and a Planning Board special permit for outside seating as an accessory use to a restaurant pursuant to 68-302.1E. A buffer relaxation is requested as part of this application. Good evening to the applicant.
Did you guys hear that?
We can hear you now. We can hear you now.
Okay, good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the applicant, Steve Bertolino, 130 West Main Street, East Islip, New York. I know we had a long presentation on the public hearing, so I'd like to rely on that presentation. Just let the board members know, one of the key issues on that presentation was limiting the use. If this board saw fit to recommend this to the town board, we would definitely be limiting the use to a coffee shop. And I did have conversations with the town attorney's office on that matter. Those conversations yielded a covenant restriction set forth by the planning department that the applicant has agreed to. In part, the only part of the covenants and restrictions that we still need to work out with the planning department is with respect to the elevations, because the existing building, as you know, is brick, is staying. So that's the only thing. Other than that, I want the board to know that the applicant does agree to the limitations set forth in the covenant restrictions, and again, rely on the previous presentation.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Mr. Colgan for a report, and then we'll come back for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. This application was previously heard on June 24th of this year. Primary concerns raised at that time were traffic, compliance with approved master plans, and precedent and the nature and character of the area. As stated at the public hearing, the location is at a signalized intersection where a drive-through has existed previously with a bank use. Trips will increase to this location. However, the turning movements would be mitigated by the 2 signals near the site. A significant mitigation is the covenant that requires a subject fast food restaurant be limited to a coffee shop. This will significantly limit evening traffic to and from the site during the hours when traffic is most intense. The hours of operation is limited to 5 a.m. to 6 p.m., which will further curtail late hour impacts and traffic. The master plan does not specifically address fast food restaurants, but rather recommends reinforcement of the streetscape for the downtown area in West Sayville. The landscaping is remaining essentially the same and will provide outside seating, which is an appropriate appearance for a downtown setting. Stormwater runoff is the primary concern with regards to the Greens Creek and Browns River Watershed Management Plan. The applicant is removing impervious area and will undergo site plan review, which will review compliance with the town's stormwater regulations. The Business 3 district is unique in that it is typically located on a case-by-case basis. Generally speaking, locations along major thoroughfares like Sunrise Highway are preferred, but a rezoning on Montauk Highway for gas stations and fast food restaurants have occurred with the Business 3 district. The concern for precedent is valid. However, though, in looking at the surrounding area, the planning staff does not see another viable location for another fast food restaurant that has a signalized intersection, has sufficient size, and would otherwise not impede pedestrian circulation along Main Street. Based on that, if the planning board feels the concerns are adequately addressed, the staff recommends the attached covenants and restrictions with the one caveat that the staff will work out the elevations that Mr. Bertolino has raised at a future date.
Thank you, Mr. Colgan. Questions from the board? Mr. Brown?
Oh, yes. Sean, as I remember from the public hearing, one of the major concerns, as you did mention, was traffic. And living in Sayville for 37 years, very familiar. I had my boat taken care of down the end there and a frequent restaurant down the end also. It's a very tough intersection with the new CVS across the street. Now, did we have a traffic study done?
Yes, the applicant has submitted a traffic analysis.
And what did our traffic consultants say when they analyzed that?
The staff did not refer the matter to the town's traffic consultant. We weren't directed by the board, and it was between two signalized intersections. So at this time, we have not referred it to LK McLean's.
Okay, because I really would like to hear what they have to say with this intersection with that report on there, what they would analyze.
I mean, yeah, we can do that.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Yeah, I think just to piggyback on Mr. Brown said, if one of the major concerns that was raised, certainly by the community that came out that evening to speak, was traffic and the safety on that street. I don't know the harm in asking them to weigh in on that. Sean, can you just clarify your comments on the business district and this use in the business district or downtown district?
Well, with regards to the concerns about downtown businesses, normally you wouldn't see certainly a fast food restaurant in a downtown location, just because you don't want to see those vehicular conflicts with pedestrian activity. So generally speaking, you do not locate those in downtown areas. It is next door to the fire station, and it's at an intersection where pedestrian activity might not be as great a concern. That's generally what we're getting at. I mean, if this were located across the street where there's a predominant downtown character or immediately to the west, staff would not be recommending any sort of drive-through, whether it be a bank, a pharmacy, or this fast food restaurant.
Okay. Mr. Bruno.
Yeah, I just like to agree with my fellow board members. I think I'd like to see if we can get LK McLean, because I just have concerns whenever we have a drive-through and it's coming out onto a main street like that. I agree with you, Sean. There's probably not as much pedestrian traffic there because of the firehouse next to it, but also the streets are kind of all offset right there. So it's a kind of strange situation. I mean, the two lights might help it, or it might be that, the opposite could be true, that it hurts it because it's coming out there and nobody's got time to pick up speed or whatever. So I don't know what the gaps look like, that kind of stuff. So if we could have them look at it, I'd appreciate that as well.
Thank you. Further questions from the board? Would the applicant like to add anything further?
Mr. Chairman, we do have available Andrew Valari from Stonefield Engineering, who did the traffic report on this, if the board has any specific questions. Otherwise, or in addition, what I'd like to say is I would hope we can get a recommendation and have that traffic study for the town board, if that's possible. If we can't get the recommendation, then obviously we table it until such time. But again, Andrew Valari is available to speak on any specific traffic questions, and maybe he can assuage some of the concerns that the board members have at this time.
I mean, I can only speak for Mr. Brown, go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Bertolino, my concern, it wasn't a specific concern, except that I know there's a lot of traffic there. And my request is for our traffic consultant to review the report and report back to us. I'm not the expert on traffic. That's why we have a consultant.
Understood. As I suggested, I just wanted the board to know that we do have our traffic consultant available. We understand this is a decisional item, so if you want the town's professionals to look at it, that's understood.
Thank you. Any further questions from the board? Mr. Bertolino, anything further on your end?
Nothing, Mr. Chairman. Just obviously want to thank you and the board for its consideration.
Thank you. That being said, is there a motion? Mr. Brown.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion tonight to reserve decision to give LJ McLean, our traffic consultant, time to review the traffic report and then report back to us.
Thank you. There's a motion by Mr. Brown to reserve decision this evening so that the traffic consultant can review the traffic study. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Matamore. Oh, Gary, I think Tim beat you on that one, so I'm gonna give the second to Mr. Matamore. Gotta be a little quicker next time. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, we're reserved. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Item 4 on the agenda, Town Board Application Recommendation Item, Bowser Kaufman 222 LLC, CZ 2020-005, northeast corner of Brook Avenue and Sunrise Highway, State Route 27, number 1675B, Bay Shore, 1675 Sunrise Highway. Applicant requests a town board special permit for a fast food restaurant in the Business 3 District pursuant to 68-302G. Site plan modifications are required as part of this application. Good evening to the applicant. Once you're ready, Mr. Robinson, you can go ahead.
I think Anthony Guardino is about to log in.
He's in now.
No,
as
I'm
well.
on. I'm
There you
on.
go.
Sorry, it just had to reboot for some reason. Hi, how are you? Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening. Mr. Chairman, as you recall, back in August, I think it was August 26th, there was a public hearing on this application. Mr. Robinson made a presentation, went through the entire application. There was a traffic consultant that accompanied him at the time. We went through the entire application. There was no opposition at that application, but the board, and in particular, I think the planning department had a couple of concerns with regard to the application, particularly with respect to queuing. And the original application that was submitted, or original plans that were submitted, showed a 10-car queuing lane for the drive-through for the Starbucks. And there was a concern expressed that, I guess, due to, I guess the experience that the town had, and we've all had with COVID, that the drive-throughs were becoming, increasingly more popular. And the question raised, or the concern was raised, about whether or not the 10-car queue would be sufficient for the Starbucks. We did speak with Mr. Colgan after that hearing, and Mr. Robinson then kind of went back to the drawing board and came up with a new set of plans, a new plan that showed actually two alternate plans. The first plan, which would be the primary plan, actually shows now a 14-car queue on the site. And then also there was an alternate plan, which we'll call like the COVID contingency plan, that if in the event that the governor issues another order and the stores are required, the restaurants required to close, and that only the drive-through would be open, there's actually a plan that shows a 17-car queue. So which we believe will be more than sufficient. The town requirement is only a 12-car queue. And then the other issue that was raised through some emails with Mr. Colgan was some questions or concerns about the architecture of the building. We have forwarded that information and comments on to Starbucks, and also to my client, is the property owner. Starbucks is actually in the process now of addressing those comments with new architectural plans, and unfortunately, they just were not able to put them together before tonight's meeting. But they are agreeable to the comments and will comply with all of them. And those comments are actually, or those restrictions are kind of memorialized, at least in part, in the covenants and restrictions that my client has agreed to impose. So I have nothing further. I don't know if, Chris, you have anything to add.
No.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Mr. Colgan for a report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This application was previously heard on August 26th. The primary concern at that time was drive-through queues during the current pandemic. The applicant has submitted an alternate queuing plan that demonstrates how queuing could be accommodated near the proposed restaurant should additional cars back up beyond what is shown on the conceptual plan. Should the pandemic further curtail indoor sitting and increase the demands on the drive-through, it appears that the drive-through could continue to operate without adversely impacting the site circulation for the greater shopping center. The applicant will be submitting revised elevations to reflect what the staff has suggested to be appropriate. If there's an issue with the new elevations, the staff will bring those back before this board. Given that this is a special permit and the business 3 use is generally appropriate near Sunrise Highway, staff recommends that the board grant the application subject to the attached covenants and restrictions.
Thank you, Ms. Colgan, and Ms. Guardino, thank you to yourself as well as the applicant for looking at the queuing issue which was raised and addressing that, as well as agreeing to the elevation changes that the town planning staff has raised. Are there questions from the board? Not seeing anything further from the applicant?
No, nothing further. Thank you, other than to thank you. Have
Is
a
there a
great,
motion?
great evening.
I'm going to start calling on people now. Is there a motion? Mr. Brown?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion based on the staff report to grant the application.
There's a motion by Mr. Brown to grant the application subject to the conditions. Second by
Subject to
Mr.
the
Moriarty. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, we're granted. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Have a good evening.
Item 5 on the agenda, Planning Board Application Public Hearing, DPB Realty LLC, PB 2020-026, west side of Haynes Court, 574 feet south of Marconi Avenue, Ronkonkoma, 40 Haynes Court. Applicant requests the Planning Board special permit for the outdoor overnight parking of registered vehicles in the Industrial 1 District pursuant to 68-340.1C. Site plan modifications may also be requested as part of this application. Good evening to the applicant.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. My name is Keith Archer, representing the applicant DBP Trucking in connection with this request. This board had actually approved an 11,130 square foot warehouse building on this site some time ago, and that the building is actually in the process of being constructed. We have actually obtained a tenant for the building, which happens to be, and interestingly enough, an isolate business that's expanding, an insulation company. And in conjunction with them, we've come up with a parking plan that takes into account the trucks that they're going to be utilizing in their business on the site. We've had discussions obviously with staff with respect to screening. We've added additional screening along the front of the building to screen the trucks that'll be parked on the site. We have an agreed upon set of conditions that we worked out with Kelly, and we're here requesting your approval of the special permit for the overnight parking of these commercial vehicles that'll be used in connection with this business.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Ms. Wozniak for, actually, I just want to make sure. I don't see anybody who is signed up to speak on this application. Just looking down my list. If anybody, there's nobody on the phone, so I don't have to ask anybody to star 9. So not seeing anybody who wishes to speak or who signed up to speak ahead of time, I'm going to go to Ms. Wozniak, who's now on our screen for a report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The subject property is located on the west side of Haynes Court in Ronkonkoma. The 1-acre site received site plan approval earlier this year to construct an 11,000 square foot warehouse office building and received planning board approval to permit overhead doors facing the street back in 2018. The property did get a stop work order in 2019 for construction without a permit, but has since ceased construction, is continuing with the permitting process. Today, the applicant is requesting a planning board special permit to allow for the outdoor overnight parking of 8 box trucks and 7 vans in connection with the warehouse use. The applicant is proposing to park 4 of the box trucks in the loading bays on site, which would reduce the parking relaxation requested to 9%. In addition, the applicant is proposing to provide additional screen plantings within the front yard to help screen the parked trucks as much as possible. The only possible issue is the location of the 4 parked box trucks on the south side of the site. Without a truck movement plan, it's not possible to determine if the trucks can safely maneuver into the proposed parking stalls. However, the applicant can easily just move the larger box trucks to be parked further east to allow for that movement. The parcel is located in an entirely industrial area, and the applicant is providing additional screening. Therefore, planning recommends the board grant the application subject to the attached conditions.
Thank you, Ms. Wozniak. Questions from Ms. Wozniak or the applicant? Ms. Wozniak, just one question. If you said the stop work order was issued, they're not currently in any violations on the property?
I don't know the status of their violations, but they did cease construction. I know that was the last comment on the stop work order. And they did file the proper permits since then for the construction.
Mr. Archer, can you address that? Or do we have any open violations right now on the property?
To my knowledge, Mr. Chairman, no, I did get involved a little into the process, so I wasn't representing the company at that point in time, but to my knowledge, no. And as Kelly indicates, we are just about through the building permit process with Steph and Carl. Matter of fact, we're just about at the end of it. But to my knowledge, there aren't any violations. But to be frank, I haven't checked.
Okay. Thank you. Further questions from the board? Anything further from the applicant?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Is there a motion? Mr. Moriarty.
Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion to grant the application subject to the permit conditions that are attached.
Thank you. There's a motion by Mr. Moriarty to grant the application subject to the conditions. Is there a second? Mr. Matamore, is that a second from Mr. Matamore? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The application is granted. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great evening. Thanks so much.
Item 6 on the agenda, Planning Board application, public hearing, BP Products NA Inc., PB 2020-028, northeast corner of Sunrise Highway, State Route 27, and Bohemia Parkway, Bohemia, 4909 Sunrise Highway. Applicant requests a Planning Board special permit for a convenience market in the Business 3 District pursuant to 68-302.1D. Site plan modifications are requested as part of this application. Good evening to the applicant.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, fellow board members. Good to see everybody and nice to see that everybody is good and healthy. Thank God. For the applicant, David Altman from the law office of Brown and Altman LLP, 538 Broad Hollow Road, Suite 301, W, Melville, New York. Sean, thanks for putting the site plan up in front. I think that's really helpful. So property, as mentioned, is 4909 Sunrise Highway in Bohemia. It's situated at the northeast corner of Bohemia Parkway and Sunrise Highway. Tax map number is District 500, Section 256, Block 2, Lot 45. Property is currently Zone Business 3. Reviewing the town's records, I will note that the property has historically been developed as a gasoline service station for the past 50 years. And in reviewing the C of O history, with the exception of tank replacements and upgrades, as well as piping over the years, the existing building and improvements are generally what exists today as for what was originally approved in C of O at approximately 50 years ago. You'll note the existing building, which is sort of central to the site, is approximately 1,788 square feet. It is currently operated with 3 service repair bays for automobiles. There is, in fact, a small, I'll call it a snack shop, although we refer to it as a convenience store for code purposes, of approximately 388 square feet on the west side of the building, along with utility rooms, restrooms, and attendant area. The size of the lot is 23,427 square feet, or about 0.53 acres. It has a lot depth of 131.49 feet, with frontage of approximately 200 feet on the North Service Road of Sunrise Highway and 140 feet or so on the on Bohemia Parkway. You will note on the east side a label which says Hudson Avenue. Hudson Avenue has not been opened. It is a paper street, and in speaking with planning prior to filing this application, there is no intent to open that street up to, or down to, I should say, Sunrise Highway. As I mentioned, the existing improvements consist of a 1-story masonry building, approximately 1,788 square feet. The building itself is set back approximately 47.3 feet from the North Service Road. There are 2 fuel pumps existing on site, and presently there is no pump island fuel canopy. One of the things the applicant seeks to do is to, in fact, install a pump island canopy to afford to both motorists and attendants protection from the elements and enhanced security and site lighting in the evening when fueling. In addition, there will be a slight relocation of the pumps, the existing pumps, approximately, I'm going to say roughly 2-3 feet to the north or closer to the existing repair building, such that there is a greater room between the pump islands to the south to allow cars to fuel, and then of course to pass by to the south for site circulation purposes. So relocating the pumps will actually provide enhanced site circulation. You will note that there are 2 curb cuts on the North Service Road and 1 curb cut on Bohemia Parkway. The applicant proposes to keep those curb cuts in place. Now, in discussing site improvements prior to filing with planning, Planning had some excellent suggestions for purposes of parking. I'll note the site is parking compliant where 16 spaces are required, 16 are provided. We're going to be making some modifications at the northeast corner of the site to provide additional parking, as well as slightly relocating the dumpster enclosure from its current location at the northeast corner of the building to slightly north and then behind the building. You'll also note from the site plan that's in front of you that there's a pretty extensive vegetated buffer. The applicant seeks to maintain as much of that buffer as possible. And with the additional improvements to the parking facility at the northeast corner, that will not invade the 25-foot setback required. There will also be some slight parking modifications at the northwest corner, moving it slightly southerly a little bit towards Sunrise Highway. As I mentioned, there is currently an existing, we call it snack shop. The town code refers to it as convenience store. It's approximately 388 square feet. And as this board knows, and I've appeared in front of the board many times in terms of other applications for convenience stores, this is by all intents and purposes a modest application when it comes to the size of the convenience store. It's a modest offering, essentially to help supplement and provide additional income to the owner operator of the station, which is particularly useful given the times we live in right now, where driving is down and increased, and any other source of income is helpful at best. Now, given the fact that this station has, this convenience store has existed for some time, the site has functioned without, to our knowledge, without incident. I know I have been to the site last week. I was there for about an hour. Site circulation was not an issue, and certainly neither was traffic on Bohemia Parkway, which appeared to be lightly traveled. I also have with me this evening, and if you have any questions from them, Lawrence O'Brien and Andy Stewart from High Point Engineering. They're the project engineers, and they can certainly address any site questions related to the operation of the convenience store that you might have. Character of the area. Character of the area is well established. Again, this has been a gas station for now 50 years. To the north, we do have single family residents, interestingly, and as well as to the east, but an interesting feature of at least part of the property of the east, and you'll notice in the southeast corner of the site plan, there is the state, New York State DOT concrete sound buffering wall, which sort of butts up against a portion of the site, which provides a sort of a unique feature in terms of improvements adjacent to the site. Due south, of course, we have Sunrise Highway. To the west, we have Bohemia Parkway. Then we have an office building followed by Kia Generation Auto Dealership. So the use itself is consistent with the area. It is well established. No other improvements or modifications to the building or expansions to the building are contemplated. This is really just an application to legalize what is already there and has been functioning safely and adequately for some time. Any questions that the board may have of myself, Mr. O'Brien, or Mr. Stewart, we are certainly happy to answer.
Thank you. Can you hear me, Sean? Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Just to, let's go to it's a public hearing. I have nobody signed up for it, nobody on the phone, so I'm going to turn to Ms. Wozniak to give us a report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The subject property is located on the northeast corner of Bohemia Parkway and Sunrise Highway in Bohemia. The property is currently improved with an 1,800 square foot building, originally CO'd in 1970 for a gasoline service station. The building on site has a 1,400 square foot service station with 3 bays and then a 400 square foot convenience market. Tonight, the applicant is looking to legalize the convenient market and obtain site plan modifications in connection with the construction of a gas canopy over the 2 gas pumps on site. The applicant is proposing minor site plan changes, which include improvements to the parking layout. However, it does decrease landscaping on site. The proposed layout requires a 74% front yard and 46% overall landscaping relaxation. Planning recommends the applicant explore modifying the parking layout on the west side of the site, relocation of the Bohemia Parkway curb cut, screening of the vacuum and air stations along Bohemia Parkway, and increasing front yard landscaping wherever possible. Based on this, planning recommends the board reserve decision to allow the applicant time to modify the site plan based on the board's comments tonight, and to allow staff time to draft appropriate conditions.
Thank you, Ms. Wozniak. We did have one person who did raise their hand who was labeled for a different application. So I'm going to ask Ms. Hilton if she would like to speak on this application. Please go ahead.
Yes, I would like to speak on this application. I live at 780 Fulton Avenue, which is right behind this gas station. I see on this map, I do not oppose him doing what he wants to do. I would love to see the improvements on this gas station, but I would also like to see the chain link fence go all the way around, not just on one side of the property. As is shown on the proposal, there's a chain link fence, but there's not one existing here.
Okay, we'll address that during questions. Anything else you want to add?
Nope, no, thank you.
Thank you. That being said, we're going to go to the board for questions. I guess the first question, either from Mr. Altman or Ms. Wozniak, would be location of the chain link fence.
So, thank you, Mr. Chair. I do note, I just got a text from Chris Tartaglia, who's the principal engineer. Is he anywhere on your screen that we can let him in?
Take a look. I don't see him as
I don't know that he was I know registration was a bit of a process, so.
We're looking for him. He is in there.
Okay, can he?
There he is. Yep.
Hi, folks. Thank you for letting me in here. So, we have. I'm just looking over at the plan, and forgive me, I'm working remotely, but there's an existing chain link and stockade fence along the northerly line. And there's also one along the easterly line. And what we're proposing to do, especially because the one on the easterly line is off of our property, it's actually somewhat within the right-of-way, the unimproved right-of-way. We're going to relocate that fence and put it on the property line. So the entire property is going to be enclosed, at least on the two sides, of course, with the fence. And I believe that they are both existing there. So. But we can certainly take a look at it. But nonetheless, the plan shows fencing on both lines.
Great, thank you. Further questions from the board? Okay. Can I just ask one question for Ms. Wozniak? On the easterly side, the landscaping setback from the paper street, does that meet the required amount of feet there? I can't tell on this without putting my face right into the screen. This would be the easterly side along Hudson and Paper Street.
Yeah, so technically that parking lot that they're showing on the east needs a 5-foot setback. Oh no, I guess since it's a street, technically it would need 8 feet. And then the same thing along Sunrise Highway. All those parking stalls would need an 8-foot setback from the street. So it's not meeting the, I guess, the setbacks from the property line.
So you're saying the one along Sunrise, I'm trying to find the parking. The parking.
I think the one along Sunrise you'll see is 7 feet. The one along Hudson is 3.7, and then the one along Bohemia is 4.1. So none of those are meeting the required 8-foot landscaping setback from a street.
And any reason why any of those cannot meet the, for Ms. Wozniak or Mr. Altman, or?
Hey, Chris, I was going to say, if Chris, you want to address the parking as it relates to setbacks, because I'm just looking at.
Thank you, Dave. Yeah. So, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yep. Thank you. So, Ms. Wozniak will recall that when we had originally submitted the plan, we did have compliant landscape buffers along the easterly side of the property, but one of the early planning commentary that was received was that we wanted to enhance the parking. So we're working within a limited envelope in terms of the size of the property, location of the building. So we actually enhanced that easterly parking area to include more stalls to get up to a code compliant amount. So it's the standard trade-off. Which variance is better, or which one is more palpable? Do you want to make parking to alleviate a potential traffic issue, but that might come at the cost of reduced landscaping and buffers? So the specific issue on that parking is that the location of the building where it is will not allow a 24-foot backup aisle As proposed earlier, previously, we had about a 20-foot backup aisle, but the comment from planning was that doesn't comply with the code, so we need you to get to 24. So hence, that reduced the landscape width. I would just note, though, that that landscape width borders an unimproved right-of-way. It's nobody's property. There's a fence and a sound attenuation wall for Sunrise Highway bordering that side. So the value of that landscaping on that side of the property is somewhat diminished. I believe most importantly, we do meet and exceed the buffer requirements to the north side of the property against the actual residential use that's adjacent to us. So I think we've done a good job of balancing landscaping and required parking, putting landscaping wherever we can and having it as wide as we can wherever we can.
In terms of the landscaping, that we increased, what type of landscaping is going in that buffer area then that we've made shorter or made smaller than the required amount? I can't tell.
So
From the type.
Yeah, if we're talking again along the east side of the property, that is where the landscaping area decreases in size from about 8 feet to about 3.5 or 4 feet. So I'm not sure I understand the question about increasing. We're actually decreasing that actual total area, but we certainly can put some evergreen plantings in there to ensure that it's dense and full.
Yeah, I think that's what the chairman was getting at, Chris.
Yeah, that's
okay, great.
Perfect. So yeah,
certainly.
And then we can make everybody happy. Okay. Further questions from the board?
So, Mr. Chair, if I might, Chris, we could just speak to sort of plantings along Sunrise Highway, because I note that was a comment from Kelly, and particularly as it relates to directly along Sunrise Highway adjacent to the pumps, where obviously we have an issue between distance of pumps and a pass-by lane for vehicles.
Yeah, so well, the condition out there now is that, and we're not really sure how it got this way. We believe it's probably before BP took ownership, but the landscape areas, the curved areas between the sidewalk and the property line were all basically had asphalt installed. I don't know, they appear to have been landscaping at some point, and somehow the asphalt truck came there and filled those all in. So we're going to remove all of that asphalt in those areas between the curb cuts on Sunrise. And actually, most importantly, there's a big area at the corner, at the intersection, that is all asphalted. We're removing all of that asphalt. We're going to keep compliant sidewalk widths out in the right of way, but everything else is going to be greened up. So there's actually a substantial increase in landscaping along the frontages, where again, I believe that's where it makes the most sense and has the most visual impact.
Thank you. Further questions from the board?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Bruno will go first.
Yeah, I'm sitting here and I'm listening to everybody talk about that area by Hudson, and it makes me ask the question that I've asked on a number of other applications. Are we sure that Hudson can't be abandoned?
I leave that to planning staff. I don't know the answer to that.
Kelly? And the second question, I have in connection with that, is whether or not, because if Hudson may also be being counted right now as a street frontage, if there were no street, there'd be no street frontage, so the requirement would be lesser on that, and they would pick up land so that they'd be able to get more landscaping. In other words, essentially leaving everything the way they are, and you'd almost end up, I guess, where the fence is now. They would acquire that land. So I'm just wondering if that's a possibility.
The applicant could make an application to abandon Hudson, but I don't believe that they have. And I did discuss this with them when I first saw the application before they submitted their special permit. And I don't remember if it was a monetary thing or they felt that the site, with the size that it was, could adequately accommodate the parking and then the pumps and all that kind of stuff. So I'd refer to the applicant on why they hadn't considered submitting that application.
This is Chris Tartaglia. I'll take this. I think the general commentary here is the gist of this application is to install a canopy over existing pump islands. That's really the sum and substance. It has gotten more complex with the legalization of the small snack shop, and more complex with the request from planning to make additional site improvements, which the applicant's willing to do. I'm just not sure that a street abandonment is warranted for an application for a gas station which functions properly. We're not changing the function of it at all. And again, as I indicated, if the benefit is a little more landscaping, 3 feet or 4 feet more landscaping to the east side, where there's no neighbor or anyone to benefit from that landscaping, it seems like a long road to get to a benefit that I don't know is necessarily warranted. It's a simple application, and that seems to really complicate it.
Well, I would just respond to that saying, but that would also help. Remember that while we look at each application individually, and there's no question about that, the relaxations you're asking for are rather large, and they might set a precedent that we're not comfortable with, whereas abandoning the road would clearly lessen your relaxation requests. So you might want to look at it just in that context as well.
Yeah, I believe, don't we have to have buy-in from the neighbor on the other side as well with an abandonment request, which is a homeowner? I believe that's a requirement as well to effectively abandon both sides of the street.
Well, they would, my understanding of this is they would also receive half of the street.
Well, that's right, depending upon whether the entire street is abandoned its full width. They don't have to accept, but it is a town board process and a town board application. And again, time and expense. And Mr. Bruno, I certainly understand your comment. I don't know that it really lends much more to the application based upon, given the configuration of the area. It's already a densely planted area to begin with, where no one is going to improve, given the fact that it remains a paper street. And in discussing with planning previously prior to filing, we all sort of came down in the same position after kicking this around, and that is it didn't really lend much to the application other than additional time and expense and for nominal gain.
David, I'm sorry to interrupt. I would just mention, we've also got a health department component with a subdivision and a lot consolidation or a lot expansion to accommodate wastewater. It really complicates what is in its face a very simplistic and straightforward application. The only change we're really trying to make is add a canopy, which probably should have been added years ago. This is one of the last gas stations on Long Island I've seen without a canopy. And again, so the benefit is one point of relief instead of needing 4 feet of landscape relief along the east corner. We don't need that point of relief, but I think maybe if there's 12 or 8 points of relief we need, so it takes it from 8 to 7, it's not a drastic improvement in the amount of relief. And I don't believe it's setting any precedents with regard to total amount of relief. There's been certainly many applications, David, you and I have been involved with, that have had similar levels of relief.
Particularly on more of these legacy gas stations where you have smaller lots and a lot of pavement.
Right.
I acknowledge what you're both saying. I just want to read you the line that says the proposed layout requires a 74% front yard and a 46% overall landscaping relaxation.
No, we certainly understand. And, again, given the dimensions of the lot and the discussion relative to providing compliant parking, which we've done, it's difficult to provide more landscaping in the front yard than what exists today based upon the location of the building as well as the pumps, again, because if you put in more of that landscaping in the front yard, you're essentially going to be taking away circulation between the curb and the pumps. And if you have somebody on the south side of the pumps and on the north side, they're going to wait.
Mr. Altman, you're missing the one point that I'm making, is that Hudson Avenue, the front yard. And if you eliminate Hudson Avenue, you are no longer asking for that much of a front yard landscaping. That's part of my point. In other words, you keep looking at the front yard as only Sunrise Highway. I'm saying that you're getting hurt by Hudson Avenue being a street, so it qualifies as a front yard. That's what I was getting at, was that you would be eliminating that as part of the application. Again, I understand your position. I just want you to understand it does solve numerous things from the technical point of this application of the items that you're asking for?
Look, from a pure variance perspective, I would concur, but I think on balance and weighing the benefit to the applicant against the detriment, right? You're adding substantial time and expense for what otherwise is, frankly, a fairly straightforward application. I don't know that it lends anything to it, and beyond what we've already discussed.
Yeah, just by way of numbers, so I believe we'd be required a 8-foot wide landscape buffer at Hudson Avenue. So we're providing 3.7 feet. So let's just call it 5 feet additional if we were able to meet the criteria. In other words, just abandoning, taking Hudson for a moment, just assuming that we were able to make the 8 feet. Mm-hmm. So that area basically would be 5 feet wide times what looks like 11 parking stalls. So that's 99 feet long. So just call it 100. So we get 500 additional square feet of landscaping. That's, I think, going to be roughly a percentage point and a half more landscaping based on the total lot area. So it doesn't provide that monumental increase that I think is being suggested in terms of the landscape if we were able to meet the 8. Of course, yes, if we take half of the distance of Hudson, but what that would actually do, that does eliminate the front yard landscaping, but it also creates a large area of landscaping on the side of the property that, again, I don't think has any benefit of value, especially because it's all hidden behind the sound attenuation wall on the highway. So I don't think anybody benefits from it. And again, it's a level of complication we haven't considered or pondered with our clients. So we'll certainly take it back, but they're not expecting to gain new property out of trying to put a canopy over some gas pumps. It's complex.
Mr. Brown, anything further? If not, I'm going to go to Mr. I think Brown wanted to speak.
I'm fine with this.
Thank you. Mr. Brown?
Mr. Chairman, I've visited this site and used it many times, living in Sayville for 37 years, and the site works. So the area that we're talking about with the parking on the side, I don't know that I've ever seen more than 2 or 3 cars there every time I visited the site over the years. And right now, to legalize the mart and clean this site up I think is a total benefit for the town with this application.
Thank you. Yep. Any further questions from the board? Not hearing any. I'm going to move forward. And I understand Mr. Bruno's point in terms of precedent, and I'm big about precedent. I'm happy with the fact that the evergreens would go in there and would sort of deal with that issue. And since it was sort of raised by us with the to increase the parking there, you could always land bank the parking, but certainly the planning staff is who inquired about increasing the amount of parking. But the extra evergreens and the fact that you're going to rip up the pavement along the Sunrise and add in the landscaping, I think certainly takes an existing use that's needs some improvement and certainly improves that. You're taking a lot of care in the back. I see you do add some trees, and I don't know if those are existing or you're adding, but certainly there appears to be sufficient landscaping in the back. Is there anything further from the applicant?
No, Mr. Chair, we want to thank everybody for their time and attention, and we would simply ask that the board grant the application as proposed. And I think everybody understands and appreciates what the applicant is seeking to do here. Thank you.
Thank you. That being said, is there a motion? I can only see 2 of you on my screen, so if anybody wants to make it, start speaking, and Mr. Brown, thank you.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to ask Kelly what her recommendation was on whether she needed time for the CNRs.
Ms. Wozniak?
Yes, I did not prepare covenants, planning board special permit conditions for this application. Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to reserve decision tonight and close the hearing based on the staff needing more time to prepare the CNRs.
Thank you. There's a motion by Mr. Brown to reserve decision this evening so the staff can prepare the CNR. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Ruggieri. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Abstentions were reserved. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Night.
Bye-bye.
Item 7 on the agenda, Town Board Application Public Hearing, S&P Realty of Long Island, Inc., CZ 2020-016, northwest corner of Grand Boulevard and Corbin Avenue, 0 Fire Road, Bay Shore. Applicant requests a change of zone from Industrial 1 to Industrial 2 for outdoor storage of equipment, materials, and vehicles, including the ability to crush and screen materials. Good evening to the applicant.
Good evening, Chairman, members of the board. This is Janice Whalen. I represent all three applicants. If we can discuss all three together, would that be okay, Chairman?
So just repeat that, I'm sorry.
I represent all three applicants,
Yes.
SCP, ZNP, and PW, and I'd like to see if we could discuss all of them together.
Sure. So let me just do the call for all three of them, and then we'll go ahead and I'll allow it to be one, and we can have the public hearing for all three at the same time as
Thank
well,
you.
if that's okay. So we're also going to hear, in addition to item number 7, S&P Realty of Long Island, Inc., CZ 2020-016, we're also going to hear Town Board Application Public Hearing, ZNP Realty of Long Island, Inc., CZ 2020-017, southwest corner of South 4th Street and Corbin Avenue, 60 South 4th Street, Bay Shore, and 44 South 4th Street, Deer Park, Bay Shore. Applicant request, I don't know what that says for. Applicant requests a change of zone from Industrial 1 to Industrial 2 for outdoor storage of equipment and materials and vehicles. We're also going to hear PWIV Enterprises LLC, CZ 2020-018, northwest corner of South 4th Street, 55 4th Street, Deer Park, and 65 4th Street, Bay Shore, and Corbin Avenue, Bay Shore. Applicant requests a change of zone from Industrial 1 to Industrial 2 for outdoor storage of equipment, materials, and vehicles. Ms. Whalen, all three applications.
Thank you. Good evening, Chairman, members of the board. My name is Janice Whalen. My office is at 424 New York Avenue in Huntington. As stated, I represent all three applicants. Appearing with me this evening is Christopher Robinson, principal at RM Engineering, and also Tom Pratt, who is available to answer any questions on all three applications. Before you this evening are 3 coordinated industrial sites north of Grand and west of Corbin, owned by ZNP. It's a 5 acres site, CO'd in 1961 as an asphalt yard. S&P, a 4.5 acre vacant lot, and PW4, a 2.3 acre lot that was CO'd, I believe, in 1967 as an oil terminal. The current uses on the site include recycling, manufacturing, and storage of construction materials, asphalt processing, storage of compost and grading materials, earthen material processing, concrete processing, and outdoor paver resale. In 2019, after receiving summonses from the fire marshal, we met with the town attorney in planning towards a stated goal of bringing about zoning compliance. We had no idea that these sites were zoned I2 since they functioned effectively as I2 sites for very many years. As part of that discussion, the fire marshal requested that we merge certain lots to create larger pieces consistent with the operation of each site. We also seek to abandon 2 paper roads, Fire Road and Marginal Road. We expect to make applications to the ZBA for height and setback variances, and we expect also road dedications along Corbin Avenue. We're committed to increasing perimeter screening on the S&P and ZNP sites. And we believe that our current uses reflect the character and nature of the existing area. The area includes light and heavy industrial, earth and material processing and storage, truck yards, propane distribution, and a closed landfill. S&P and ZNP pay close to $100,000 a year in property taxes. They employ 8 people. The PW site, including its tenants, employs about another 5 people. So there's not a lot of employee activity on the site. According to Mr. Pratt, the site receives approximately 50 truck visits a day, spaced out between 6 a.m. and 4 p.m. There is no additional activity proposed in the site. We're seeking to bring about zoning compliance for the existing operations. On the ZNP and S&P sites, we seek outdoor storage and permission to crush and screen construction material. On the PW site, we have, obviously the oil terminal use is no longer there, but the site did receive permission to have outdoor storage of the oil terminal vehicles. On that site, we seek outdoor storage to permit the tenant to continue reselling pavers as they have done to local yards. The asphalt on the site, the asphalt processing is monitored by the DEC. We have a roofed over structure on the Z&P site that's visible from Corbin Avenue. That site, that structure, that accessory structure, we're probably going to have to get a height variance for, but it's there because of DEC mandates that the material be kept dry. Again, we expect dedications along Corbin, and as we have further discussions with the planning staff, we'll develop increased perimeter screening, parking details, drainage details, we'll provide truck circulation, and identify any waivers to the extent that they're necessary from this board. We're committed to working with planning to develop reasonable improvements to preserve quiet enjoyment of neighboring uses consistent with how we've been operating for years. We thank you for your attention, and do you have any questions? Oh, I can't hear anybody.
Thank you. Can you hear us now?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. I do not see anybody who wishes to speak on this application. Not seeing anyone, I'm going to turn to Mr. Colgan to give us a report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since we're reviewing these all together, I'll try to consolidate the staff report also into one. As stated by Ms. Whalen, the applications propose the legalization of various degrees of outdoor storage, and they all need a rezoning to industrial 2. This general area of Edgewood, south of the Deer Park train station, has been recommended for these types of uses and this zoning category in the past. So in general, the planning staff does believe that this would be appropriate zoning designation. Be as it may, the staff has received cursory comments from the engineering division, which include right-of-way improvements, providing for on-site drainage, establishing adequate site circulation for vehicles and movement of materials, detailing the parking requirements for each use, listing setbacks for the outdoor storage, including for some of them, the walls and the fencing that right now don't conform with zoning requirements. There are opportunities for additional landscaping in some of the front yard areas of these properties. There's also a history of flooding issues that have occurred in this general area. Additionally, some of the buildings and some of the sites will need variances from the Zoning Board of Appeals to remain. So the staff would like to work with the applicant to work on more detailed site plans to verify how the sites function, ensure that they function adequately without impacting the local roadways, particularly with the overflow materials, and ensuring that the drainage is working. And based on that, the staff would recommend that the board reserve decision to discuss these further with the applicant.
Thank you, Mr. Colgan. Are there questions from the board? Not seeing anything further from the applicant.
No, Your Honor. No, Chairman.
Thank you. That being said, is there a motion? Mr. Brown.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I want to say I just remember this site going back into the early 1970s, where the town did a major drainage problem there. And then we also had the closure of the Sonia Avenue dump. But so if we move into looking at drainage and everything, we just want to make sure we're not go backwards there. It was a massive flooding area years and years ago. With that being said, Mr. Chairman, do I make 3 motions?
Yeah, I would make I think you can make a motion for all 3.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, on application CZ 2020-16, CZ 2020-17, and CZ 2020-18, I would make an application to close the public hearing and reserve decision tonight.
Thank you. So there's a motion by Mr. Brown to close the public hearing and reserve decision on item CZ 2020-016, CZ 2020-017, and CZ 2020-018.
May I ask a question, Chairman? Are we closing the hearing or continuing the hearing until we meet with planning?
The public hearing portion is closed. So
okay.
That's the only part that we're talking about.
Okay.
Is there a second to that?
I would second.
By Mr. Moriarty. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions were reserved on all 3.
Thank you
Thank
very much. Have a good evening.
Great, thank you very much.
Town Board application public hearing, Leo Sagristano, CZ 2020-015, southwest corner of Hawthorne Avenue, number 10, and Champlain Avenue, East Islip, 10 Hawthorne Avenue. Applicant requests a change of zone from Residence A, Business 1 and Business 3 District to all Residence C District in order to construct 16 senior apartments. Good evening to the applicant.
Yes, good evening once again, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the applicant, Steve Bertolino, 130 West Main Street, East Islip, New York. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, we can.
I always want to make sure before I go too far. So as you may know, this is a parcel located at 10 Hawthorne Avenue in East Islip, which is just south of the railroad tracks. Hawthorne Avenue runs east to west, and it has a combination of business and residential uses on there. For the most part, this site itself is a triple zone. We've got an A, we've got a B1 and a B3, with the B3 being closest to the railroad up on Hawthorne. Immediately to the south of that is the B1 district, a little piece, and then south of that even further is the Residence A. The parcel itself is nestled between Champlain and Greenwood, and for the most part, it's being used by Sagristano's Landscaping and some other contractors. It's a pre-existing non-conforming use. It's been there for about 7 decades, and the use is pretty intensive under the B3 zone and the non-conforming. The site itself is approximately 2.84 acres, and as I said, it's nestled between the all residences on the east and the west side. The proposal is to put in 16 units. The application is to change from the 3 zones to a residential C for senior housing. In the minds of some, that might be an up zone. In the minds of others, we've heard rumor that it's a down zone. You know, quite frankly, I think the better approach is to look at the entire use of the site, which is more intensive as the B3 zone, rather than anything that might be Residence A. As the pre-existing non-conforming parcel, the entire use going from north to south, even going from that B3 down to the A1, is really being entirely used as a B3. The current use is pretty intensive with trucks and vehicles, landscape equipment. We have outdoor storage. You know, we have earth moving equipment. We have dirt piles, all the things that, you know, you would sometimes even find in an industrial 1 or an industrial 2 sitting in here on the B3. We do have some sand, some dirt, some dust. And for the most part, you know, it's been there forever. So most of the neighbors are I won't use the word okay, but they're aware of it. They tolerate it. And we generally don't have any complaints going on. But I do want to point out that this really is a heavily commercial environment that's taking place over there. For the most part, with that heavily commercial environment, we have some traffic that comes back and forth. And if you can imagine the trips that we'd be generating, you have about 60 employees coming and going to the site morning and night. That's about 120 trips. And then when those employees come to the site, they often leave in vehicles. And those trucks might have 2 or 3 employees in each vehicle, generating another 40 to 80 trips as those vehicles leave the site, go to jobs, and then come back. So altogether, this site is generating a lot of vehicular traffic, which we believe is going to be greatly reduced when you go to 16 units at 2 cars per unit on the senior use. The proposed complex, for the most part, is going to be owned by the Sagristanos. Many of you may know them. They do a lot of parking lots and driveways throughout the towns. They've been in business for a long time, and they will continue to maintain this particular site as the owners thereof. They're going to not only maintain the landscaping, but they'll be doing the snow plowing, and they're going to contract for private rubbish or garbage removal on site, curbside. So we won't have any need for dumpsters. You will have a garbage truck going down the street, just as you have in any other residential setting. With respect to the landscaping, the site plan does not call for any relaxations. We comply and exceed the total 20%. We provide 48%. On the front yard, 10% required. We're providing just under 12%. With respect to the parking, this was where it gets a little tricky. With the site itself, we have a requirement of 2 units per dwelling, and that does not include anything with the garage. So even though every unit will have a garage, we still are required to have 2 units multiplied times the proposed 16 units. We need 32 spaces. We're proposing 46 spaces, so we obviously exceed. But where I said it was a little tricky, we have the AOH, the Ancient Order of Hibernians, is immediately to the east on the opposite side of Champlain Avenue. And as of right now, part of this conversation with the application has to surround itself with the use that the AOH has on our site. Currently, the Sagristanos rent out a small portion, a dirt lot that you really can't see from the site plan on the screen, but it would be immediately to the south of that parking lot that's on Hawthorne. That dirt site is obviously not paved. It's got brush all around it. It's got some holes. And what happens is you wind up with haphazard parking. There's no designated lots or striping. So it generally doesn't produce an orderly fashion of parking. Part of our proposal, if you look on Hawthorne Avenue, you see those 20 spaces, is to provide the parking for the AOH that they currently have in a more orderly and neat fashion. We would then take that dirt lot and use part of it for our units. I think there's going to be 4 units right there. I think there's 2 units right there just south of that parking lot. We're proposing, as we do now, to have a lease with the AOH. The Hibernians have been consulted. We've had our community outreach sit down with them. My understanding is that not only the board, but many members also support this. But more importantly, right now that dirt parking lot has egress and ingress on Champlain. The proposed site plan is going to have the ingress and egress on Hawthorne, which hopefully is going to redirect some of the traffic off of Champlain and Greenwood and put it onto Hawthorne. Now, because Hawthorne is kind of saddled in with the railroad tracks, you really have to go down one of these streets to get back to Montauk Highway anyway. But the hope is that we can generate some of the traffic to Hawthorne, have them go east and head over onto Connecticut Avenue. As you go down Connecticut Avenue, you do have some other businesses. You have a daycare, you have some other a karate school, but this is really a primary residential area. Other than the AOH Hall, you have Greenwood Hall over to the west at the end of the block. But I would still submit that, overall, this is a residential area. It should maintain its residential character. And I do want to point out that a certain yield we could have if we were to go to Residence A. I understand there was some conversations with some of the residents that, they wanted to keep the Residence A as opposed to what they call the down zoning. And again, I believe it's really an up zone entirely because of the entire use of the parcel. If we were to yield as a percentage of the acreage calculation, we could get 13.77 single-family houses on this lot. However, we're proposing 16 units on our plan as opposed to the 14, if we want to round that up. If we were to take from a almost as of right change of zone to Residence A, we could yield 8 houses. And I know there's a discrepancy between what I just said was 13.77, but that's taking it with special permits under the B3 zone, a special permit under the B1 zone, and the other part of the A zone. Obviously, we don't think that that would be a wise move. I don't think anybody would approve that. So we bring it back to changing the zone to all A, and we would yield 8 single-family residences, but we wouldn't be providing the community with the parking lot that the AOH needs. I'm sure many of the community, immediate community members know that there's a lot of street parking by the AOH. When they have a function, it gets a little crowded over there, and we're hoping to alleviate that. If we were to provide 7 single-family residences and the parking lot, our yield goes down, and obviously that's not conducive to us. And we felt that this would be more of a compromise from us granting the AOH a lease as they have now on a new paved parking lot. We get the 16 units that make it financial reasonably for us. We convert this, hugely commercial industrial piece nestled in all these residential areas into a residential setting. The specifics of the interior, I'd like to pass the baton over to Dave Bush, the architect who designed the units. He can give you more of the detail as to what these units are going to look like. and then I can come back on if the board sees fit for questions. But before I turn it over to Dave, I just want to let you know, my understanding is that through our community outreach, we've had over 20 letters in support, and more than 20 out of those 20 letters, I believe more than half of them are members within the 200-foot radius. And out of those members of the community, I believe 4 of them actually expressed an interest in moving into the facility. So our feedback has been very good. I don't know that there's been any, major complaints that need to be addressed. So I'd like to turn it over to Dave Bush, and then obviously if you have questions, come back to me.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Appreciate that introduction, Steve. David Bush, registered architect, address at 90 West Main Street, Bayshore, New York, and I'm pleased to be here this evening. As Stephen introduced, the application before us is, relative to a change of zone at the corner of Hawthorne and Champlain. What's that? Oh. Is it possible to, can I share a screen? Because I'd like to load a different board first. Sean?
You can. Yes, you can.
Okay. I think I got the right. Nope. Sorry, just trying to find the right file. Where'd it go? Okay. Can everybody see the screen? It says Hawthorne Cottage.
Nope.
Mine says Zoom.
No. Zoom on the screen.
I'm still on the screen. Okay. Sorry about that.
Chairman, while the applicant finds the screen, can I just ask a quick question of Mr. Bartolino?
Right ahead.
Mr. Bartolino, did you do a tax impact analysis comparing the taxes for the residential uses that you would the yield of residential that you spoke about compared to the senior apartments that you're proposing?
No, we did not do that, but it's my understanding that the taxes on the senior units, because it's a rental community, would be taxed as on a commercial rate rather than a residential rate. But the actual amount or difference between one versus the other, we do not have an exact figure.
Yeah, because I was curious to see how many school children the non-age restricted residential would have generated compared to the no school children at the senior apartments, and what impact that would have had on the school district.
Understood. We can certainly look into that, Mr. Ferrigiari. If you need us to, we would certainly do that.
Might be an interesting thing to take a look at.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Everybody can see the screen now. It says Hawthorne Cottage, correct?
We can see
Okay.
it.
Correct. Thank you for your patience, right? So again, the application before us is a proposed change of use from business 1, business 3, residence A to a residence C zone. When we look at the residency zone, the primary use of that zoning district is for senior living, those 55 and over, if you will. In taking a look at the criteria, the district criteria within that zoning district, there's several things we have to consider. Number one, that the site shall be located at convenient distance to downtown and alternative retail shops. Number 2, that the site shall maintain convenient access to public transportation. Additionally, the site shall be sufficient size to maintain a buffer and landscaping, setback requirements, provide for adequate parking, and maintain a residential appeal. And the site shall provide for open common space amongst the senior living community. All right, so I think those are important guidelines as we kind of click through and look through things. So what this depicts is really just the location of the site. This red upside down L is position of site. We have Champlain Avenue to the east, Greenwood to the west. Union Boulevard to the south of the site, and up along the north is Hawthorne Avenue, represented by the blue line. And if we look at, excuse me, if we look at proximate distances or proximate community, the surrounding convenience of downtown, again, right down the block, we have a public, we have plenty of public transportation. We have the Great River train station to the east, walkable distance down the south to Main Street, Montauk Highway. We have a public bus route. And then along this strip, we have several, we have medical office, physical therapy office, dental office. We have retail shopping, Pat's Market Shopping Center, imaging center, prescription, there's bowling centers, US Post Office, et cetera. So all that right within walking distance to the site as it exists, right? And this site is surrounded, again, as Stephen mentioned, by residential single-family homes. So taking a look into the site, we see Greenwood to the west again, Champlain Avenue to the east. There was mention of a Ancient Order of Hibernian Hall. That's this building here, just to the right of our site. And what this shade area really depicts again is our site, which tucks into the back of surrounding single-family homes. Hawthorne to the north here. What we see as an infill is some of the reference to the dirt lot with surrounding perimeter trees and the industrial use in the back. So if we take that lot and introduce the site survey, what we see here, oops, click the head one. What we see is actually the survey depicts, a curb cut, which is along Hawthorne Avenue, 2 existing buildings, a primary structure to the front, a larger storage building on the west side to the site, and then there's secondary smaller scale storage buildings at the interior of the site. As well on this, this overlay, we see some of the green deciduous trees, the larger scale oaks and maples, calipers will say 10 inches and greater, that were cited on this survey surrounding. So if we start to introduce some color and look at programming of the site with the introduction of the first slide, what we see is some of the larger scale deciduous trees which surround the perimeter. And then there's growths of smaller scale caliper, secondary trees and vegetation within the perimeter represented by the green areas down in here. So important for the approach, the reason we're depicting this is how do we build the site and kind of maintain some of the larger trees and growth. As well, this line represents some of the landscaping, some of the bigger trees that exist in the perimeter outside our site window. So as we start to develop the site, certainly we want to look at landscaping front yard, right? How we maintain a street presence that has a residential appeal similar to the other residences. So we have a front yard along Hawthorne and Champlain. Secondarily, on interior of the site, we'd like to consider the buffer relative to the other existing residences, single family homes around it. So we're looking to build that. So as a site approach for access, we would propose access along from Hawthorne Avenue. Hawthorne Avenue and kind of move in with an access to the east. And then we start to introduce these little senior living single family homes and the idea of front yard access with a clustering into some of the green space. So it's an idea of front yard, backyard. As we have 3 clusterings, we introduce Each one of these units has a garage and a driveway. So we introduce a clustering of common guest space, which is clustered in 3 areas, guest parking. As mentioned, this is kind of a give back. It's kind of a good neighbor, giving back some parking to service for the Hibernian, which is represented. And then the final thing introduced is some front yard green space so that we can situate perennial foundation plantings, things like that. Finally, as things introduce themselves in the overall site, we'd have some common green spaces, again, integral to the site criteria for the residency, common green space. These axial lines represent pedestrian access, which is through the green area of the site, as opposed to the front yard. With that, we introduce kind of a meandering path, the idea of a walking path amongst the landscaping. And we kind of arrive at a site plan. What this depicts is the 16 units, again, senior homes with a clustered plan. We have singles, doubles, and triples. You know, some of the double and triple maintaining the streetscape. When we look at the scale of these other fronts along here, of the existing Residence A, single family homes. So when we look at the site plan, the definition, as we run through, what we propose here is the 16 homes, and we're in compliance. What really we're demonstrating here is we're in compliance with all the total lot areas, lot coverage, etc. And we have one setback relief that we're looking for. The Residence C requires a 50-foot front yard setback. We do have plans which can provide for that, but in the making of some of the interior green space, bringing things back into the front, we propose this to bring this to a 40-foot front yard setback. That 40-foot front yard setback is in keeping with the other residential zoning around it. Residential A zoning has a front yard setback of 40 foot and an allowance for 30 foot with lots of 100 foot or greater. All the cottages are single story as proposed. So we look at the individual units. We have access, a little front covered portico, an interior living space, kitchen, dining, living. Each unit has a garage. We have a master suite to the back of the unit, master bedroom, closet, and bath. And then if you kind of a flex space, depending on the individual user, this might be a study or home office, or a space for one of the children to stay over, visiting children. The architecture of the homes are a proposed craftsman style. So this is the front of the house with some craftsman detailing, and the rear of the house with a little covered rear porch. These little cottage units are a total of approximately 1,070 square feet, just under 1,100 square feet of living space. We have a small garage, 250 square feet, and then a covered outdoor patio space. These are nice small units, and again, single story, second floor. So if we take a look at some of the individual architecture, right? They're just a craftsman style detailing. We talk about raft details. We have box bays which pop out to the front with a simulated copper detailing. We mix a simulated cedar shake and batten board siding, post lintel details at the fascias. There's assembly of some of the front of the units. If we look at the back of the units, some of the same ideas at this little covered porch space, a box bay at the back of the bedroom. And then finally, the making of the community. What the community would look like. This is a perspective from Hawthorne Avenue. As we access in, this is the fabric along Hawthorne. There are a couple of existing larger scale trees which remain here. Obviously, they're taken out of the picture so we can view into the community. And this fabric of the collected, this is a single unit with some other clustering, the making of that senior living community. Mm-hmm.
Mine's the end.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Anything further, Mr. Bush?
I think that's, we have other things we can share. Let me share one or two other things. Can everybody still see my screen, or I got to do the share again, I think?
You cannot see a screen.
Sorry about that. We're sharing again.
Does she have to do something like?
Raise a hand, depending on what she's on.
Yeah. No, let's do this. So this is just, again, looking at the landscape areas. We do comply with the landscape percentages. Total site area landscaping is a requirement of 20% within the residency. This is a proposal of 48%, and front yard is a requirement of 10%. We propose 11.8, and that's even inclusive of the good neighbor gesture of the parking to the front. Right. See that?
Where I'm down.
Is that the completion?
I have one more, please.
Go ahead.
All right.
That's the check. Are we done?
I just want to do the tax thing. I want to let them so that they have it.
Do I have it?
This diagram here kind of points to the scale of what we're proposing. These are the single-story little cottages as an individual unit. This is the scale of some of the existing surrounding perimeter trees. And as mentioned, if we looked at a typical Residence A construction, two-story dwelling units with a maximum ridge height of 35 foot, we see your typical house between 30 and 32 foot to ridge height on a two-story single-family dwelling. The proposal of the Residence C is these single-story little cottages is to remain below the tree line, light impact to the surrounding residences. That's what we have, and thank you very much for listening and your patience with the Zoom.
Thank you. Anything further from the applicant?
Yeah, can you hear me still?
Yes, we can.
So just doing some quick notations on paper as to Mr. Ferrugiari's question. If each home were to get about $12,000 in taxes, it would yield about $87,000. The senior rentals would go about $80,000. So the difference is about $7,000. But obviously the seniors have no impact on the schools, whereas single family residences, 2, 3, 4 kids per house, perhaps, you're going to have a much greater impact. So the tax difference is about $7,000 just on rough calculations, and the impact to the schools is nil with the seniors, presumably.
Anything further, Mr. Bertolino?
No, thank you. Obviously, if you have questions or from the public, we're here.
Thank you. So we'll go to public comment, then we'll come back for a staff report, and then we'll go to the board for questions. I'm going to go to Anne Marie and Michelle Leschik. When you're ready, just unmute. You can go ahead and speak. You're still muted. There you go.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, thank you for hearing us tonight. Myself and my sister inherited my house that we currently live in on 7 Woodland Street. We are on the west side of Woodland, and we've lived here for approximately 20 years. Over the last number of years, I'd say about 5, Sagrestano, I believe they think that they have been a considerate neighbor. However, the construction sounds that have emanated from this company have been, to least to say, disruptive. We cannot open our windows in the summer. We cannot, even this time of year, we cannot sit outside on our patio because the beeping and the moving of the dirt is very disruptive. So we wholeheartedly support this project and would hope that the board also does as well, because as being that a 55 or over community is looking to move into our neighborhood and raise the property value of our neighborhood, I can only support what's being done here. So I hope that the board considers this as well. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Pamela Fremgen. And you're just unmute. You can go ahead and speak.
She doesn't even live there. She goes? No. Oh, she's not the one. The one you mentioned before. Yeah. She called and spoke to you because maybe she said something good.
Hello.
You're live. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Pamela Fremgen. I live on 51 Wildwood Court in East Islip. I've been part of the group that's actually been opposed to the 7 and 9 Bayview build for the senior housing. And unfortunately, this sounds very much the same for this location. I actually was trying to talk our community into listening and keeping an open mind on this build. However, now that I've heard the presentation, it's pretty much the same. So you're talking about an area, and I've been by the area, that is somewhat of an eyesore. And you're talking about building twice the amount of properties, which again, we use the same word cottage that they're trying to use over on 7 and 9 Bayview, which is not the appropriate term, by the way. It's a cottage, if anyone knows what it is, it's near a lake or a beach, and this is neither of them. Senior housing is supposed to be a walkable area. This is not walkable. So I think we really need to consider what we're building here. We're trying to overbuild in an area that really should be half of the amount of units. And also, you know, the whole discussion about the entry and exit on Connecticut being an area that there's not a lot of traffic, which is completely ridiculous because of Westbrook that has just been built. And there's a tremendous amount of traffic there now. So I think we need to take a step back and take a look at the plans. I am not opposed at all by this location changing to a residential area. In fact, I think it would be a good thing, but not for this scale. Okay, so you're talking about double the amount of houses and over 14 the amount of parking spaces.
Thank you. We go to Janet Tierney.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. I live on Champlain Avenue. When I look out my front windows, I would be looking towards these units. I'm agreeable to it as long as there are no more than 16 one-story units as seen on the site plan dated September 23rd, 2020, with, you know, the accompanying pavement and vegetation. The current use of the property has fast-moving trucks on Champlain Avenue daily, and I mean daily. So this is a different situation than the Bayview area, which I understand the problems there. The early morning beeping and bumping is very annoying. I cannot imagine that there will be more car traffic on Champlain Avenue than all the trucks going back and forth and cars in the morning when they're coming and going to work and they're leaving for their, you know, their business during the day with the large trucks. And we have traffic for the Hibernian Hall, which I have no objection to. Please note that Champlain Avenue residences are closer to this area than the residences on Greenwood Avenue. They have very long backyards. So we're closer to this area, and I have absolutely no objection to this project going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. We go to John Hanley. Mr. Hanley, you're in the room. If you want to unmute, you can go ahead. Mr. Hanley, I'm not sure if you can hear us, but if you can, please unmute your microphone and you can go ahead and speak. Not sure if you're having problems there. We're going to go to Susan Phillips, and then we'll come back to you, Mr. Hanley. Ms. Phillips, go ahead and unmute when you're ready. Ms. Phillips, we still cannot hear you either. Right, so Ms. Phillips or Mr. Hanley, if either one of you can unmute, you can go ahead and speak. Ms. Phillips, I think you're live now. You want to try and say something? Still can't hear you. While Mr. Hanley and Ms. Phillips are trying to unmute, I'm going to go to, it looks like Melinda Safrani. Ms. Safrani? Ms. Safrani, if you want to unmute, you can go ahead and speak.
Mute.
There
All
you
right.
go.
Okay. It told me to do Alt A, which is very different than the meetings I'm used to joining. Sorry about that.
Yep.
Okay. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Awesome. Okay. So my name is Melinda Safrani. I'm new to the area. Well, I'm not new to East Islip. I've been here most of my life. I'm 49 at this moment. So I've been here a while, but in this actual neighborhood, I've only been here for 3 years. I live on Greenwood Avenue. My backyard does butt up next to this property that is being proposed for the zoning change. I do have one question for now, and it's just that I do believe that I'm under the understanding that with the Bayview property, that there was a study done and there is an abundance of senior housing in the area that is not completely full at this moment. So my question is, if the Sagristanos come to the point where they're having a difficult time renting to seniors, there are vacant properties of the 16, they can't rent to all of them. Does it open up to younger families, or is the proposal strictly for 55 and over? Because obviously that if it opens up to younger families, and it would impact the schools and the taxes. So that's my question.
Okay, great. I'm going to finish the public hearing, then I'll have staff answer that question for you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Ms. Phillips, I'm going to try coming back to you, or John Hanley. If we still can't hear either of you. Okay. We'll give you an opportunity if you can get your mics to work. We're going to put you back standing. If you can figure out the problem, just send us a message on the chat feature, and we'll bring you back in to speak. In the interim, I'm going to go ahead and ask Mr. Colgan to give us a report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This application proposes rezoning approximately 2.8 acres of land to senior multifamily for 16 attached and semi-detached senior citizen apartments. The subject application consists of several lots, which are zoned Residence A, Business 1, and Business 3, and currently is utilized by contractors and a landscaping company. Surrounding uses include the Hibernian Hall and single-family residences. The zoning is somewhat eclectic in this area, and the non-residential uses are generally inappropriate for such an area. The proposal provides some open space and recreation area and maintains a residential appearance due to the smaller scale of the proposed units. Main Street is just under half a mile from the site, and the Long Island Railroad is approximately 3/4 of a mile away. This represents an opportunity to clean up a non-conforming site and remove inappropriate business zoning. It also provides neighborhood parking, which is a benefit given the unique uses nearby. This is a unique housing concept that is not prominent in the town or on Long Island and would diversify the housing stock for seniors if it were to be approved. But we did hear some comments here tonight, and the staff would recommend that the board reserve decision to discuss any of those issues with the applicant.
Thank you. Ms. Colgan, can you just answer the question on senior housing and what happens if they wanted to change that?
Yes, so the residency zoning is limited to senior living. So the applicant would not be permitted to rent any of those units to families or younger families without A, changing the zoning category, and B, also lifting covenants that most likely the town board would impose on the property that would preempt any families from renting these.
Thank you, Mr. Colgan. I'm going to turn to the board members for questions. I'm not seeing any questions from the board members. Oh, Mr. Brown.
Oh, yes. For the applicant or Sean, in reference to the parking, I understand that you're building the parking lot, which is the dirt lot now that the Hibernian Club is using. Is that taken into consideration for the parking for this site?
If I'm live, I can answer that.
You're live.
Okay. Yes. Hello again, Mr. Brown. So the answer to that question is easy. Yes, we've taken that into account. I believe I addressed it quickly on my presentation. The dirt parking is, we're getting into semantics, but the current dirt parking is technically just south of what we're proposing now. So it's kind of hard to see. What we're proposing now is along Hawthorne Avenue. It has 20 spaces, obviously paved and striped and drainage, the whole shebang that goes along with that. And with that parking, we exceed what we need for the units. With respect to, the use for the Hibernian Hall, we're going to enter into a lease with them because that's what we have with them now, so that they can still utilize this parking. We don't see there being a problem. As I said, we're required to have two spaces, 16 equals 32. So we're way above what we need for this site. If you want to get into, the technical aspect, usually senior citizen housing can have 1.75, and that would bring us down to 28 required as opposed to the 32. And on the 28, technically, we're too shy. We have 26, not counting the parking lot. So yes, the application as it stands has more than enough parking that we don't need a relaxation. However, when you do take into account that parking lot will be used by the Hibernians, you also have to consider that they don't use it on a daily basis. Sure, they have an event, they have a catering. I'm sure it will be utilized to capacity, but not every hour of every day. And on that note, not every hour of every day will we exceed or need 2 spaces per unit plus the garage that is not generally counted.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I just had a couple of comments. One is with that parking lot. I don't know exactly how the units that are surround the parking lot face, but I would hope you would take into consideration, the lights from the cars at night coming out of the Hibernian Club, because they do have a nice bar and they do have music venue there. So in the evening when people come out of there in that parking lot, hopefully the lights wouldn't be shining into any of the units. I'd also like to say that transferring this from business 1 to business 3 and putting in senior units, I think is a plus for the town. And as some of the comments that we had with the dust and the noise and everything, that would be eliminating from a residential neighborhood otherwise from this property, I think would be a real plus. And I think that we're going in the right direction. And also, somebody mentioned about, cottages and, the density. 1,000 square foot, a little over 1,000 square foot cottages. You're looking at 16,000 square foot of housing compared to, let's say, they were 3,000 square foot houses, 5 to 6 of them maybe. So I don't think, or I do think that the trade-off with density is a plus for the town in this application.
Well, Mr. Brown, you're 100% correct. If we had a 3,000 square foot house, we could get 8 as of right, and it is a residential 8A. So the amount of, if you say square footage density, if you will, as opposed to unit density, absolutely, we're putting in much smaller units in here, which allows for more green space, more plantings as the buffer that would be required. And yes, this was a thoughtful application for myself. I had to advise my clients that I need to beat them up a little bit with respect to their current use. And, this is not a site that somebody wants in their backyard. And some of the speakers here tonight, said it better than I could. They want to be good neighbors. And as much as they think they are good neighbors, nobody wants that activity in their backyard. And it's time that we put it to bed. It's been there for many, many decades. And the Sagristanos are saying, enough, we're going to, do what we need to do. We're going to make this a much better place for the community.
Thank you. Mr. Moriarty?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, just a couple of observations. I would agree with the comments from the applicant as well as from Mr. Brown that this is a significant improvement to an existing use. It's a non-conforming use. The residential senior housing, there will be much less intensive, it seems to me, than what current uses are. And look, it also looks like a very attractive design, interesting layouts, and I agree with Mr. Brown as well. These are smaller units, and I think it allows for better use of landscaping buffers and the like. So at this point, I'm generally supportive. I think it's a significant improvement and a good one for the town.
Thank you, Mr. Moriarty. Further questions from the board? Not seeing any. Mr. Bertolino, you mentioned outreach to the community. What type of outreach did you do to the community?
Well, we did a lot. We went door to door. Well, not me personally, but we had our community outreach person going at least 5 times door to door. I just believe the other night, I don't want to misspeak, but I think it was late last week, they had a meeting with the Hibernians, open to the public that wanted to go and the members over there, because we needed to get that feedback. And we know what the Hibernians wanted as far as the lot. We have some letters in support that you should have as part of the record from the Hibernians, both on we'll call the corporate level as well as on the membership level. So, we've heard what the people have to say, and you can hear it for yourself tonight. The only person that had something negative to say lives on Wildwood, which is probably 1.5 to 2 miles south. They may have some rough feelings with the Bayview project, but ultimately this is different. This is a completely different project. And regardless of what the sentiment is on Bayview, this is a good project that should be approved, in our opinion.
Yeah, I mean, my point there was if you certainly knocked on the doors of these surrounding neighbors and they're not here this evening, knowing that this was up is generally a good sign. And those that spoke who live in the area seem to be supportive of it. So just wanted to raise that. Anything further from the board? Not seeing anything. The applicant like to add anything further?
Yeah, I think that, or from what we've heard, maybe we can make a motion to approve and skip the interim process.
Right from you, Mr. Bertolino, getting a little ahead of yourself, but okay.
Oh, why not be bold, right?
All right, so if there's nothing, Mr. Moriarty.
No, I was wondering if you were looking for a motion.
I was about to say that, so is there a motion, Mr. Moriarty?
I would make a motion, Mr. Chairman, to close the hearing and reserve decision, allow planning to work with the applicant to fill in some details and finalize the application, have it brought back to us hopefully relatively soon.
Thank you. There's a motion by Mr. Moriarty to close the public hearing and reserve decision. Is there a second?
I'll
Mr.
second.
Bruno? Oh, Mr. Frugieri is going to get that second. See that? He had his mic on. I had just a finger from you, Mr. Bruno. We got to work out these rules.
Which finger?
Mr. Frugieri, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions were reserved, and hopefully we'll see you back soon on this one.
Mr. Chairman, members, thank you and bid you farewell again.
Thank you.
Aye.
Thank you for hearing us this evening. Thank you.
Okay.
Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to close this meeting.
Motion by Mr. Frugieri to close the meeting, second by Mr. Moriarty. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Abstentions. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thanks, you too.
Thanks, everyone.